Today, my friends, I want to have a conversation about personal identity and the role that tattoos play in that very process. But as per usual, before we continue that conversation, I want to dive into the numbers. According to my friends over at the Pew Research Center, they estimate the number of people sporting tattoos these days varies by age, gender, and country. However, it is estimated that between 10 and 20% of the worldwide population has tattoos. If you want me to break it down by country and region, here we go. In the United States, 30% of the people have tattoos. Among them, 40% of those are under the age of 35. In Italy, it is estimated that 48% of the population has tattoos, which is the highest rate in the world. Meanwhile, in Canada, north of the border, 1/3 of Canadians have tattoos, with women and millennials being the ones to most likely have them. And finally, in Europe, at least 12% of Europeans have tattoos. Now, my friends, I'm inclined to introduce you to my buddy Mark Nara. He says that in this increasingly secular and commercialized world, that he offers a different and spiritual approach to tattooing, which is profoundly innovative. With over 15 years of tattooing experience, Mark has dedicated his career to redefining the tattoo experience by reconnecting the modern society with the ancient wisdom of tattooing as a sacred and transformational experience. Mark's message will help you redefine and reframe how we all think about tattooing. And he joined me this week to tell me more. I'm Kevin McShann. Let's have this conversation. Yeah, absolutely. So, Mark, if you're ready, I'll take a moment to welcome you to the program, my friend. And I'm super excited to learn about your spiritual approach to tattooing, my friend. Great to see you, and a happy weekend to you, my friend.
Thanks, Kevin. Let's go for it.
Absolutely. Now, Mark, you said that in this deeply sort of commercialized and secular world, you offer an approach to tattooing that's deeply spiritual and innovative, my friend. So I'm wondering if you can elaborate on that for me.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I guess tattooing's just been pulled into the same sort of commercial realm as everything else that's almost disposable, even though it's obviously not. It's obviously a deeply embedded process into our experience and who we are. But the way that most people are engaging with it is almost as if it's some type of fashion or some other product that they can buy on a whim. And there isn't much consideration, guidance, or conversation around the far-reaching impacts or the relationship that is the appropriate one to have with with your tattoos, which is something that, humans in the past, if we zoom out a little bit and we don't look at our current epoch, have always had. So that's in a nutshell. It's just that the tattoo world's been sort of swept up with the more globalized, I guess, movement towards quick and easy and disposable and all of those layers. There's a cheapening of tattooing that's happened with time, in conjunction with, I guess, a cheapening of many other aspects of life as well.
So how do you suggest that we reverse that trend, my friend? How can we still make tattooing a enjoyable, ethical, and a respectable process? What are your thoughts there?
My thoughts would simply be, and this is kind of what I'm doing anyway. This is my approach. I'm not going to say I have all the answers, but it's kind of on the table for everyone collectively to be participating in it in a way that's different to how we currently do. So for me, it's just paying really, really close attention, and sort of taking that beginner's mindset of not thinking we know exactly what tattooing is. So paying attention to what it's doing, each of us individually, initially to ourselves, and this, I guess, this approach that I'm talking about of paying close attention can be a bit uncomfortable for people, and I think there's a bit of a barrier because it means you've got to start taking a lot of self-responsibility. So because a tattoo isn't something like a haircut or a fashion style or a handbag or a car or a poster on your wall when you're a kid, when you grow and you move away from it, it's not easy to just change, take the poster off the wall, change the pair of shoes, grow your hair out. It sticks with you. And most people, instead of reflecting on the different stages that they've gone through in a way that's healthy, they just move away from it and forget about it. The thing with tattooing is you can't move away from it and forget about it. It's still there, even if you don't align with it anymore, if you don't identify with it anymore, it's still there. And so a lot of people end up living with tattoos that don't represent them very well, and they just have to deal with it, or they might not be happy with it or excited about it or enjoy it anymore, but they still have it. And so I'd say that the most important thing to do would be to pay attention to the tattoos you have that don't feel right anymore, because within that there's a whole bunch of value. There's all these insights that you can use to reflect on why you got it and who you were at that stage and how you've changed, that might give you some tells on if you were to further your tattoo process, if you'll further your journey, take another step and get another tattoo, so you don't replicate what you've done in the past, so you don't get something else that just ends up being disposable or something you're going to move away from. It's something that you can use to better yourself, and we have a couple of frameworks at Tattoo Pathway to help offer that those steps and that way of relating. But it is a process. It's in the work at the moment. It's not something that's fully worked out yet or refined. And to further that answer, in terms of how I suggest people go about it, you used the word so they can still enjoy it, and I think that's important. It shouldn't just be this really serious thing. It should still be enjoyable, but it should, so playful but serious. There is a serious layer. You do carry it through time. It does stick with you. So as much as you want to enjoy it, maybe trying to develop a way of engaging with your tattoos that isn't about instant gratification. That's part of that cheap and disposable culture, is we're kind of seeking kicks and thrills and, so it's enjoyable, but what's the enjoyment in a big hike? It still challenges you and you want to get to the top, right? So it's like the real reward in it, the real enjoyment or the investment comes with time. And you got to know going into that process of getting tattooed, that the result is at a further reach than instant, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. And Mark, you know that I firmly believe in the process of setting expectations, and really meeting our own expectations. Because you know, it's my view, if you don't meet your own level of expectations, it's hard to meet the level of anybody else's from an artificial standpoint, my friend. And as it relates
Mm.
as it relates to tattooing, you know, it's a permanent indicator of our identity and sort of the principles and core values we stand for. So, how can we make the tattooing process and ultimately the tattoos that we get part of our personal identity? What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, well, you know, when I listen to the position you're in and how you feel, it's like you've already given consideration to these layers of your values and your expectations. So I always say, if you want a meaningful life, if you want a meaningful tattoo, you need to be living a meaningful life. So they're going to correlate. Okay, so if someone's identity, if who they are, is already paying attention, um, developing a set of moral and values to live by, those things are going to come through in their tattoo. They're going to be a good representation of that. I think the thing that a lot of people are mitigating is they're engaging in the tattoo process before they have a life process of evaluating themselves. So I think evaluating who you are and the tattoo process can go hand in hand. And so tattoos, a lot of the time, people will get tattooed to reinforce who they think they are at this point in time, opposed to a relationship of like, hey, this is the moral, but maybe also allowing some space in your prescription of who you are and what it's about for it to mature and for you to mature. So getting tattooed in a way that's going to hold you to a standard that you have not yet achieved, I think is a good way to approach it, opposed to here's a medal of who I currently am.
Yeah, and Mark, you also tell us that when we get tattoos, we should ask ourselves the question, why do we want to exist? You know, a lot of people, and I agree with you, spend money on books, listening to podcasts, or going to retreats to answer the question, why do we exist? So, how do you think we should reframe our approach to answering that particular question? What are your thoughts there?
Why we exist? Yeah, the existential questions. Hey, well, I mean, I guess part of that, is part of this pursuit that everyone's in. The meaning crisis, I think is what you're pointing to. Hey,
That's correct,
Dr.
yeah.
Viveki. Yeah, yeah. Well, like tattooing's a good layer of that. I think pursuing meaning is a healthy thing. Um, that will to meaning, as Viktor Frankl would say, or I just did this course with John Viveki. I don't know if you've heard of him. He just put out a book, The Meaning Crisis. And he does a lot of research into the cognitive science behind meaning making. Um, and so if we look at the current process that people are in, which is this existential void or vacuum where things seem meaningless and they're trying to work out what the point of being here is, it's kind of contemporary, because if we look at older cultures, it's like they knew what their roles were and what they had to do on this real simple level. And so I think the fact that, again, we're in this culture where things are so comfortable and so easy, and we've always got food on the table, roof over our head to a degree. So many people are. They're the ones that get stuck wondering what the meaning of life is. So a big part of it would be to re-engage, I think. Re-engage with the simple things. Tattooing's one of them. It's this really, really old process that people have always done. But I guess it's the degree of attention that you bring to your questioning. Like I said, if you're really paying close attention to anything, you're going to be able to get tells or read different layers of your experience that will point to the thing that you're seeking. So if you're seeking meaning, if you actually are seeking that, then you can almost point your focus, laser focus on any particular thing, and it's going to start to reveal something to you that'll give you the next sort of stage in your search for it.
Yeah,
that's been my experience anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. And Mark, I'm curious to ask you about one of the fundamental questions and reasons I wanted to start this podcast is I looked at the world, my friend, and I said there had to be more in society that brings us together rather than working to divide us, my friend. So I'm curious to get your thoughts on how we can return to a place in society where respect and understanding and compromise are paramount, where we can get back to a place in society where we can have respectful disagreements on our way to coming to a consensus as mutual as possible, my friend. So how do you think we can restore respect in society? What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's hard to know whether we've ever had that as society or not, really, because it's I haven't experienced a time where it's been like all pervasive. I think there's definitely lots of isolated examples where it happens within a smaller dynamic, right? Like a family dynamic that's civil, and the respect and the compassion and all of those layers are there. Different work environments, friend environments. I'm sure even different, towns and cities and states and countries, there's different variation of it. But on a global societal level, I don't know if it's existed before, or if it can in this world of polarity. I mean, even inside all of us internally, it's pretty hard to get to that place where our own discourse and dialogue is completely respectful of ourselves and others. So I guess I would say it starts with the individual, and it's a process of constant awareness and application and introspection. And so again, kind of to loop back to one of the opening things, this self-responsibility piece, and I suppose that's why I come at it from the tattoos, because that's what I'm looking at every day, so I'm paying close attention to it. And then I'm looking at people that maybe aren't, and trying to get them to point their awareness back onto themselves to see if they can get balance and coherence and understand themselves more fully, which makes you more empathetic and, I guess, porous to the relationship you have with the world, which I think helps with what you're talking about, helps sort of bring it back into a place where things are more harmonious. I mean, is that answering your question, Kevin? Is it like this trying to find this state of like harmony again?
Yeah,
Is that what you're looking for?
yeah, well, no, yeah, because I think we live in a world, Mark, where we've become so polarized, where we can have opinions only if they agree with a certain line of thinking. And, I think that
Mm,
we've lost the ability to have, meaningful conversations that move the needle of progress forward. So that's why I asked the question. And, Mark, you also brought up the idea of, social responsibility of the people that you work with and interact with. So I'm curious, my friend, how do you define authentic social responsibility, and what does it mean to you to really embrace the concept of social responsibility from a societal perspective? What are your thoughts there?
mm. Well, it's changing pretty rapidly, hey?
I
Like
would say
even,
so, yeah.
yeah, even this layer where I'm in Australia, you're in Canada, and we're having these conversations. So I think we're at a pivot point. We're at a pivot point where it's not as simple as the old the old ways or the old laws or the old maxims of just respecting a neighbor. You know, you walk down the street at the moment and you don't even get eye contact from most people or a smile, depending on where you're at. Whereas I can remember being little and in the small community I was growing up in, you know, you would acknowledge everyone you went past. And so there's this layer of, again, it comes back into attention, where our attention's going. Um, and I think some of the basic things of social responsibility would probably just be to bring your attention into your society. So paying attention to what's happening there in a way where you start to consider your actual reason for being part of that society. Like acknowledge yourself as part of it, and do something that matters and fits. It comes, I guess, there's this like the locality. It used to be that you were part of the people in the area that you lived with. There was no other option. You couldn't order something online and it turn up at your doorstep. You couldn't, dial a Zoom room and talk to someone across the world. So at the moment, there's lots of opportunity. There's lots of little windows for people to escape the real time societal situation that they're in, the condition of their lived experience, which is what I think that breakdown is of, like, the person across the road, you don't know who they are, or the person you crossing on the elevator, their attention's in their screen. Or the classic, not that I get much of it where I live out here because I'm in the bush, but the person on the bus or the train looks up and looks around, and every single person's attention is in a device instead of in the physical room that they're in with everybody. So I think a good layer of social responsibility, like I said, everything's changing pretty quickly. And it kind of feels like everyone's attention's shifted to the online space, and that's at the expense of the physical experience. So maybe people, again, bringing attention and trying to find balance and harmony in that space.
Yeah, and Mark, you also say that we have to do a better job of connecting with our universal, consciousness and our spiritual force, my friend. So, how do you think that is connected to our level of fulfillment, and why do you think we should ask those questions more regularly? What are your thoughts there?
Well, I guess it comes back to mattering, like why something matters. So it's another one of those existential questions. I mean, research shows now in the science and the cognitive areas that in order to have meaning, or fulfillment, it might be another expression of that. You need four different things, and basically that's like you need to have structure or coherence. You need to have rules or guidelines that help things make sense. Need to have purpose, significance, and mattering. And this thing of mattering is like beyond yourself. So what you're doing can't just be self-focused. What you're doing with or trading your time for needs to make sense for you. It needs to, all of the things that you're doing need to be funneling in towards like some reservoir, some main goal, some quest. And then that quest needs to matter beyond you. It needs to matter in this bigger picture. And so I guess just acknowledging that there is a greater power than yourself, that every single person, every single aspect of your experience is intertwined with, probably tethered to from the root of wherever this all comes from. That gives that sense of mattering. And so to answer your question, the reason why I say it's important to contemplate and, from where I sit, establish a relationship with whatever this greater power is. You said universal consciousness and like a spiritual force. It's like there's no language to describe it. Human language will fail to describe what this is. God is kind of like the time-tested. The universe, I think, fails as well. The universe is is a creation. We're going beyond that. It's something that sits outside of time and space. That seems to be, from all of the different points in time and people and places, those that are the most adept in their relating to this concept say it's outside of time and space. It's beyond time and space, and then it's like internal. So it's like there are all of these signposts that point people in the direction. Again, if their attention, if their sort of laser point focus is on understanding something beyond themselves and why that makes them and their life and their experience matter, it'll open up. That laser beam will carve a sort of path if they pay attention to it.
Yeah, and Mark, I'm also curious to ask you, what lights your internal fire of desire or ignites your passion for the work you do, my friend? From a personal perspective, what aligns your internal fire of desire, my friend? And how do you challenge yourself to be 1% better each and every day?
Well, I'd like to say I have a good track record where I am 1% better each and every day, but it's probably more accurate to say that it's 1% better one day and 1% less the next, and maybe 2% the next day. And it's definitely a chart that fluctuates. It's not this exponential curve of progress and Superman experience by any means. It ebbs and it flows. And the thing that keeps me sort of going, or keeps my internal fire going, is the connection that we just referred to in the last question. So it's understanding that this experience is bigger than me. And it really helps having a family and children and good relationships and acquaintances, and seeing that things that you do when you come from a place of alignment beyond yourself, and you're constantly working on sort of your developing and nurturing your discernment of whether something is generative and regenerative of this thing we're experiencing of life, fulfilling and uplifting, or whether it's sort of damaging or pushing things down, or having an awareness of that, seeing that play out, and then having a commitment and sort of being devotional in your path, and it not being simply a pursuit of self-desire. So as soon as it moves out of that and you're like, okay, well, the thing I'm pursuing is beyond me. It's about sort of uplifting and elevating the whole. Then it's okay to have a day that's, hard or that's challenging. It's okay that it's like the condition of the day actually makes it really hard to keep the fire burning, like it's torrentially downpouring and your shelter's being blown over. So you want to keep your fire going. It's going to be pretty hard, to the point you might even give up on it and just want to curl up somewhere warm without the fire, because it's taking a lot to tend to. That's okay. So for me, it's like, I guess it's a relationship of understanding that life is full of all of the seasons, and to just persevere. Like, persevering is the thing.
Yeah, and Mark, I'm also curious to ask you about the personal values or core values that contribute to your identity, my friend. And I'm also wondering your thoughts on your non negotiables in life when it comes to not compromising your happiness, my friend. So you can take that two-part question in any direction you wish, my friend.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I guess it builds on the last one, right? Where it's everything's changing. So to say there's non-negotiables, everything's pretty negotiable. You can negate most things with life because you've got to be open to changing. I suppose it it is quite polarized. So it's like, so long as it's real, so bringing truth into it. So long as it's good, it's for betterment. It's not something that's deteriorating something intentionally or causing harm and damage. Um, and like that's it. So it's like, so long as it's in a forward direction in terms of what's happening, then the way that I view things and the way I approach things, you need to be pretty movable. I don't think rigidity is the way to go with it necessarily. I've found anyway, and again, there's ebb and flow to it. So I guess the season of it would be, it's like when something's sort of green and it's growing and it's malleable, and then it kind of becomes quite hard. There's lots of benefit in that because you're starting to know something, but then at the same time, it's like, because we can never really see the finish line or know everything, it's like that hard thing's going to be broken down by something else. There'll be another element to learn about. The oak tree will break at some point, even though the process of getting to that point was valuable. So understanding those sort of like that cyclical pattern-based layer of our experience is really important. And so the only real constant that allows it to have some type of sequential building is the directionality of it, which I think is that it comes from the heart, shoot from the heart to the heart. That's important for me. Making sure it's all real, good, and true. They're kind of my non-negotiables, if you wanted them real, good, and true. It's not, if it's fake, there's untruth. If it's wrong or bad, in a way that you can clarify, in a way that I know a lot of things sit outside of that. But
Yeah, absolutely. And Mark, we're all driven to succeed in different ways and reasons for success, my friend. So I'm curious for you, how do you define personal prosperity?
prosperity, yeah. So prosperity is like advantage. So it's like gaining. It's a gain in anything that's good for you, right? And obviously that can overlay lots of different layers. I mean, prosperity can also be um, used in a way that's not good. It's like someone's prosperity if they're an unfit character can cause a lot of damage, right? So prosperity, I see it uh, simply as this like gain and advancement of something, but then it's how you use it. You know, so I know that's like not answering the question. It kind of just came at it from a different angle. But it's like you can be prosperous in lots of different areas. It's like you can be your health can be prosperous, your family can be prosperous, your financially can be, spiritually you can be. But I think it's more this like taking aim on a path of betterment and contributing to a story beyond yourself. And then wherever you are prosperous, whatever arena you're prosperous in, it's like what you do with that. Like, is your prosperity being put to good use? Is it valuable?
Yeah, for sure. And Mark, you always say that if you have someone tell them about their tattoos, you can tell them what sort of a person they are. And I'm wondering, my friend, for you personally, what is your most meaningful tattoo, and why do you hold this belief, my friend?
Good question, Kevin. Um, so I don't have a most meaningful tattoo because I come from a different angle. I see everybody as just having one tattoo. Like you only have one skin. So instead of going like shoes, trousers, jacket, I just go like it's just one outfit. What are you wearing? It consists of all these parts, but it's just one outfit. And so uh, when it comes to my tattoos or anyone's, it's just one. It's just one thing. And it's taken a lot to deconstruct my perspective on tattooing and reconstruct it in that way. But that's it. It's like all the tattoos are just one tattoo. It's one ongoing process that I haven't finished, that I value instrumentally. It's extremely high value, the process of getting tattooed, and all of the different stages hold various pieces of information about who I am, and they're all valuable. So it's like the collective information that's contained in my tattoo process is of really high worth. That's pretty much where it's at for me at the moment, and it's a work in progress.
Well, yeah, well, life is always a work in progress as well, my friend,
Mm.
for sure, my friend. But I'm also curious to ask you about, if I asked you about your life motto or a personal promise that you've made to yourself to help you get through adversity or celebrate success. I'm wondering, Mark, for you, what's the personal promise of prosperity or overcoming difficulty that you've made to yourself, my friend? I'm fascinated to get your answer there.
Mm. Um, I think I'm probably in a place now, after coming at it from very like many different angles. especially younger me being like probably quite firm in like this is what it's about. This is what drives me to just accepting each sort of stage and process and each win or each loss, each thing that sort of uplifts me or each thing that challenges me. There's just an acceptance. One of my teachers used to always just say "seshwe," which is just like all is as it should be. And again, this draws heavily on having an established devotional relationship to something beyond yourself, to a greater power. That's what allows that to sort of sit deep within me and give me the comfort that I need if things aren't going well, and to be able to step back from, I guess, being too caught up or engaged in something that is consuming and see it potentially for what it is beyond my own personal reaction or personal benefit even. So like not being too cut down when something doesn't go the way I want it to, and at the same time not being too elated when something seems to go really well, and more just going like, okay, things are going the way they are because there's something that I'm contributing to a process beyond my own. And that's the main orchestration of everything. So it's all happening the way that it should be, and just paying attention so that you can kind of align yourself in a way that makes it as easy to navigate as possible. I think happiness and enjoyment and fulfillment are really important, but part of it's understanding that that's not actually the goal. And if it is, you're gonna experience some suffering, right? There's lots of different things that point to that more so.
Mm-hmm. And Mark, before I ask you my last question, I've got two really fun ones I wanted to ask you, my friend. According to the Pew Research Center, my friend, when we look at the global population and what a part of the world is getting the most tattoos, the Pew Research Center tells us that 48% of Italians in Italy are getting tattoos, my friend. That's the most in the world. So I'm just curious. I'm just curious to ask you, my friend, why do you think Italians are getting so many tattoos? What are your thoughts there, my friend?
That's interesting. I didn't know that. I have worked over there. Why the Italians? Good question. I don't know enough about their current social atmosphere, I guess, but it could be the fashion thing.
Sure.
It could be that. It could be like wanting to sort of keep up with what's happening. There could be a layer of this, like, yeah, there could be a layer there, but I'm a bit apprehensive to sort of say anything because I'm definitely not informed well enough to be able to comment on that. But that's a pretty high percentage. I think globally it's about 30% of people. So in an isolated spot to be at 50, that's interesting. Do you have any tattoos yourself, Kevin?
I do not because I'm from a young age I've been terrified of needles, so I don't like people touching me with needles. So I respect the work that you do, my friend. But for me personally, I'm a big believer in self reflection, and I think getting tattoos is a way of self-reflecting in a period or stage in your life. So I'm curious, Mark, what role does self-reflection play in your life, my friend?
Yeah, well, it's one of the most potent forms of self-reflection. It's so valuable for that. And most people don't actually get the benefit of the self-reflection, like we were saying earlier, because they don't want to put in the energy to do it. But that's the whole point of tattooing. So it plays a big part for me, because I'm kind of in the game of self-reflection. That's what the tattoos are. But a lot of people don't get the benefit. They get tattooed and they forget about them. So that shows the level of unawareness that the contemporary tattoo culture has. Tattoos are a form of recording something so that you remember it, and then we forget that we have a tattoo. It's like putting a post-it note somewhere so you remember something, and then just never looking at the post-it note. It's like the post-it note sits on the door for the next 3 years until someone else comes and goes, "Hey, what's that post-it note on your door that says to remember this thing?" And you're like, "Oh, I forgot that was there. I put that there 3 years ago. How about that?" That's kind of the situation people are in with their tattoos. So for me, like I said, my tattoo is one big ongoing thing. I'm still in a place of reflecting on and sort of unpacking all of the different things that I've recorded with post-it notes all over me, so I can make sense of what was happening internally and how that has influenced my path forward to this stage, so that I can more accurately move forward.
Mm-hmm. And you know what? The name of my podcast is Let's Have This Conversation, because I wanted to spark, meaningful conversations that move the needle of progress forward. So I'm wondering, in the tattoo world, as a tattoo artist yourself, my friend, I'm curious to ask you the level of conversations that you get a chance to have with people that want tattoos, and going through the process of the emotional or psychological connection to tattoos. What are your thoughts there, my friend?
Can you just clarify the question a little bit, Kevin? So, like, I'm having these conversations with people when I tattoo them, and having those conversations is potentially moving the needle of progress forward. Do I come from that way? Is that what you mean, or?
What I mean by that is, I'm curious to ask you about the personal connection people have to tattoos, and why they get them, and how deep that they go into conversation with you about why they're getting tattoos, and how do you internalize that as a tattoo artist, my friend? I'm curious to get your answer.
Well, people come, like, generally, people come in to get tattooed for all sorts of reasons. I've kind of niched out, Kevin. So I'm like, I live out in the middle of nowhere at the moment. It is about to change, but I've had lots of renditions where I don't really function within the industry in the same way. So I'm not in a studio. You can't just walk in and get a tattoo. So people kind of need to already be having quite a considered approach to be able to come into a space and work with me. So for that reason, I'm having conversations before they're even here around why they're getting tattooed. So the level of depth that we go to in terms of what their tattoo is about is very deep. It's very deep. It's a substantial layer of questioning and investigation and comprehending what it is that they're doing, and what that's going to look like and how that's going to impact them. So in my own process, the conversation we have is a big part of it. We're talking for days before a tattoo even happens, and then that conversation is ongoing as they we're having conversations as they come in, approaching the tattoo. And this can take, just to give you some context, I might talk to people for years before they get tattooed. I might be talking to someone for years via email and over the phone. And then they're here, and they're here for multiple days usually. So the conversation really escalates. We start going into a very different space because they're outside of their everyday experience and they're in a contained situation that again, we've got this laser focus attention on what's happening. And then they go out back into the world. They come back down and into the world, and we continue the conversation. So there's a big layer of dialogue around what's happening. And the reason for that is so their process is really well considered and combed of any sort of the contemporary knots that come in from that unawareness around a tattoo process. That's the role that I'm playing with someone when I guide them. So I don't consider myself a tattoo artist anymore. I'm in a place where it's more like a tattoo guide. There's someone comes in and yes, I tattoo them physically, but I don't want to be doing my artwork on them. I want to be accurately recording and reflecting to them the point in time they're at and who they are. And the tattoo being something that helps move them towards an optimal placement of themselves in the bigger picture of their life.
Fair enough, my friend. And, I've got two questions left, Mark. And the first one has to do with why you're excited or proud to live in Australia. And tell me, my friend, as you mentioned at the outset of our conversation, we're having an international conversation as you live in Australia and I'm here in Canada. So tell me, what gives you the most pride about Australian culture, and why do you like living in Australia, my friend?
I mean, Australians are very, very easygoing. So there is a lot of benefit to that. Everything has its pros and cons, though, right? So I like the easygoing and the hard-working nature of Australians. Like out where I am at the moment in the country, you see a lot of it. It's like people don't get too fussed or worried about anything, and they'll meet what it is that they have to do without many complaints. So there is that layer. There's a bit of a tide turn, and I don't think it's just Australia, but like the younger generations are getting a lot softer. But I think that sort of that carefree and hardworking, loyal aspect of being here in the people is amazing. And then the thing I think that's one of the things to be proud of here as well is like the culture that exists outside of the sort of Western societal structure is extremely deep as well. So once you start connecting with the country, the story and the people and the way, and this is I think with like a lot of places, when you start connecting with the traditional people, it's there's always something beautiful and proud to connect to wherever you are. But that's definitely the case here.
Yeah, absolutely. And my friend, my final question for you today has to do with your own personal and professional legacy and how you want your legacy to be defined. What are your thoughts there, my friend?
Legacy. Well, yeah, in terms of this topic of tattooing, if I was to like pigeonhole myself now and have to put that together, a legacy now, like Tattoo Pathway is guiding people on transformational tattoo journeys, and that's definitely not the mainstream for tattooing. But our contemporary tattoo culture is this small blimp in human experience. It's a few hundred years out of like however many thousands of years humans have been doing it, and especially in the last 10 years, it's deteriorating rapidly. And so I suppose I want to help sow the seed for the regrowth and the transformation of tattooing as an integrated part of global culture. So something that's significant and sacred and guides people to understand themselves and their place in the world in a way that's fitting and real and good and true.
Yeah, absolutely. And Mark, finally, tell me if people want to get connected with you, buddy. What's the most effective and efficient way they can do that?
Look, I'm pretty easy to contact. Like, I'm not some superstar. So if people send me a DM, I'll write back to them on Instagram. It's at the Mark of Nara. The most effective way, though, is to come into Tattoo Pathway. So we've got tattoopathway.com. There's a community there. It's a circle community. It's kind of a little contained social space. And it's kind of like a subscription-based tattoo wellness plan, if I was to try and sort of frame it up. So it's a community of people that are all going through this process together. We have a couple of different methods and exercises, and we have coursework, and then we have community calls and community gatherings. And in that space, everyone's working out what it is that their tattoos are. They're doing that reflection. They're going, okay, what are my tattoos that I already have? What can I learn from this? And doing it with people that have done it before, so you don't have to do it alone. And they have a lot of tips for you. And then how can I use these tattoos in a way to move forward effectively? And so Tattoo Pathway community is the most effective way to engage. I take all my tattoo bookings through an email, which is on the website. But obviously, it's like people that I'm forming relationship with inside that community space. I'm going to be more inclined to be working with them, So.
Yeah, absolutely. And well, Mark, I want to thank you for your time and for your unique approach to the modern tattoo process, my friend. You've really given this some meaningful thought and consideration, and I want to thank you for engaging in conversation with me today. It's most appreciated.
I also really appreciate your time and your attention. And I can see where your laser beams pointed in the conversations you're having and how you're unpacking things for yourself, and just want to applaud it and say you're doing really, really good stuff, Kevin, and I appreciate the conversation.